Hello, everybody. Welcome to our cookies, data usage, and targeting session. My name is Nicole Bayo. I am one of the programming directors here with WICT SoCal. In my day job, I am a partner manager at Vizio, working with our channel partners for Watch Free Plus. And I am thrilled to have you all here today. It's my honor to introduce Angela Kozlowski of Cox Media. Angela is the Director of Digital Sales Strategy at Cox Media, which is the advertising sales division of Cox Communications. Cox is the third largest cable entertainment and broadband services provider in the country, serving approximately 6 million residences and businesses. In Angela's role, she's responsible for driving revenue through developing and implementing strategies across all of Cox Media's markets. She has been a sales leader in the digital advertising space for over 7 years, leading a team of digital consultants and partnering with sales teams to drive digital revenue. Her passion is for her teams to provide expert guidance and technology in the ever-changing digital advertising ecosystem. Today, one big challenge she will be focusing on is what is referred to as the death of the cookie in the industry and what that means for advertisers in the media space. We know this touches a lot of things such as privacy and targeting. So Angela's going to help us go over the implications and how we can be prepared to adapt. Angela brings a wealth of knowledge from the cable television, broadcast television, and brand direct industry. In 2020, Angela was honored as one of San Diego Business Journal's 40 Under 40. In her free time, you can catch her hiking or exploring San Diego with her husband and her dog, Chloe. Please welcome Angela Kozlowski.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Nicole. Before I get started, I just want to say thanks to WICT for inviting me and for the opportunity. I'm so humbled to be a part of this phenomenal group of women and men that have joined today. So thank you so much. So thank you for that introduction. I feel like I don't need to say anything about myself. So like Nicole said, I am Angela Kozlowski, working at Cox Media, who we wish we were number one, but are in fact number 3. So in my role, I'm really responsible for driving revenue across all of our markets. So from a tech perspective, I know we're here to tech it out, but I am going to share my perspective from a sales focused initiative. So just bear with me as I go through the tech. So before we dive into the data, the tech, I would love to know who I'm talking to today. So if you could, I would love it if you drop your name and maybe your company in the chat, just so I know who I'm speaking to today. And while you're doing that, if you have any specific questions, if you could type them in the Q&A section, and Nicole and I will get to those at the end of the presentation, just to make sure that we can answer all your questions. Awesome. Yay, Cox Communications, hello. Awesome, hi everyone, thank you. All right, so let's dive in. So today, what we're gonna cover is what's a cookie, who relies on it, and the demise of cookie and now what? And then we'll go towards the questions. So the content itself, just to give you guys a heads up, is about 15 to 20 minutes. And we'll definitely allot for those questions at the end. Awesome. So what am I talking about today? All right. So I know this is a hefty slide. I'm not going to read it to you, but at a high level, cookies are small pieces of code placed in a browser when you visit a site that collects user data. So that data really can be aggregated to show things like clicks on a web page, pages you visited, and there are 2 types of cookies. We're obviously going to focus on the one that has the actual cookie on it, just because that's my jam to show actual cookies. So first party, which everybody's talking about, it's all the rage, is really created on the website level, and it's directly created and stored by that website, and it's focused on improving a user experience. That's its main goal. We're trying to tap into it now to use it as a data set. Whereas a third party is created by tech players and is really focused on targeted advertising. This is really what allows advertisers, analytic companies to track individual browsing history across the web or on any site that contains their ads. So like I said, today we're going to focus on that third-party cookie. However, with the caveat that first party is important to the conversation. Awesome. So what type of digital advertising formats rely on the third-party cookie? So why are we even having this conversation? Why do cookies matter is really what we're going to go through. So the answer is basically all web-based programmatic advertising formats leverage cookies to some level of extent. So you can kind of see I've got this little circle, and if the circle's full all the way, it relies on it more. So that's what's really important to note. But frankly, it has been the excitement around the digital advertising industry over the last several years that we could target specific users based upon what they're doing online and where they're going. So it's really been our competitive advantage, us digital salespeople, when we're selling digital products, we've been able to get really hyper targeted, hyper specific on who we're trying to reach. So ultimately, it puts a little hiccup in the process on what we're doing from an advertising standpoint. The mediums that really rely on it heavily are display and pre-roll video. They have a heavy reliance on this third-party cookie for targeting. Formats outside of walled gardens. So a walled garden, just for those that may not know, is really that enclosed environment that controls the end user's certain website experience. So and a good example is Google or Amazon or Facebook. A lot of those platforms, if you have to log into the platform, that's considered what we call a walled garden, which is going to be more and more important. And we're going to be focused more on direct site placing instead of programmatic ad buys across the space, just because the limitations around that third-party pixel is going to change ever so slightly. Audio has primarily been based on contextual targeting, which is what are people listening to from a playlist, and not necessarily who's listening and what they're listening to outside of the web or where they're going. So it's really been focused on the inside of the platform. So it's been moderately impacted. And then once you get into social and search, you're again dealing with those walled gardens. So they have a ton of their own first party data that's used for targeting. So it's going to be easier for them to transition the loss. And the format itself is if you just think about search, you're already searching for those specific keywords. So I know what you're interested in based upon that search pattern. And then video, the great thing, I work what I'll say a video company. And the great thing about that is we have a linear television over the top advertising. This is going to be less impacted because they don't typically rely on third-party cookies to target. They're really looking at networks. They're looking at potentially what type of domains, what websites, and really targeting users that way. Smart TVs and set-top boxes use data sets for the linear TV that are not necessarily cookie enabled. So the disappearance isn't the end of the world for them. However, there is some level of OTT that does utilize this type of targeting. And then ultimately, there's a lot on this slide, so I apologize in advance. I'm not going to go through it with you, but I will send it out and make sure that WICT has it so you have as a great leave behind. But ultimately, players across the digital advertising ecosystem are going to go through a decent amount of change in the next coming years. Whether you're a brand, a data management platform, a DSP, or an ad exchange, these platforms utilize cookies in some way, shape, or form. Ad tech players in the middle of the value chain. So when we're talking about data management platforms or the DSPs, ad exchanges, ad networks, or are the most reliant and are going to have to pivot away from their business model. So ultimately, they have been finding users online and targeting them programmatically, and something's going to have to change. Clients are more likely to try and shift their budgets to walled gardens. So potentially doing some more contextual advertising. I almost feel like we're kind of going back in time. So when we start to think about digital advertising, we got more and more and more targeted over time, which has been such a huge benefit for us. But ultimately what that is doing is it's putting us in a position where we almost have to go back to contextual targeting, where we're targeting on types of website, type of content that's on that site. versus relying on the third-party pixels. We're going to need to rely on first-party data of those sites. Brands doing digital advertising will be severely impacted with their relationships and DSPs and a little bit disrupted, whereas they're able to, again, buy programmatically, but now they can really go back to buying directly from those walled gardens and establishing those relationships there. So why are we talking about this third-party pixel and what's going on with the demise? So why is this happening? So now that we really understand what they are and what they've done and who uses them, what's going on? So this is the really fun part of the conversation. I know even tech is pretty technical and fun. Well, what's going on with cookies and what's led us to this development? Well, over the last several years, there has been an increasing concern over consumer data privacy, which has ultimately led to legislation to protect the consumer. So all of this has been put in place not to do anything to advertisers, not to hurt the media infrastructure or landscape, but it's to protect the consumer. There's been lots of questions of what type of data is being collected on me and what can you see about me in the internet. So this conversation is not a new one. In fact, back in 2012, we saw the European Union write laws about the right to be forgotten or the right to erasure. So that really just gives citizens the right to demand their power back for collection of their data. So in this case, this has already been in motion for several years, which then led to the GDPR. So the GDPR is the General Data Protection Regulation, which is another law that is, data protection and privacy in the European Union and the EEA. And it really just is protecting people's personal data and transfer of that. So ultimately, we want to continue to use the internet. We want it to continue to benefit us and have all of the rights to that information. But we want to have insight to what's being collected on us, why is it collecting us, and frankly, block it from being able to happen. I know it's really exciting stuff. The US released the CCPA. So that's the California Consumer Privacy Act, which is really, if you sum it down into a nutshell, it's the right to know, the right to delete, the right to opt out and not discriminate. And that was signed back in 2019 and then put in effect in 2020. So hasn't been too long, but it's really starting the industry to have those conversations and really evaluate where we are today and what type of changes we need to make. So finally, all of this has really led to what the demise of the cookie is that all of these publishers, DSPs, we're going to have to start following new sets of rules and being more cognizant and transparent of what we're collecting on the internet to protect the consumer's privacy. So that's really what it comes down to is we're doing what's right for internet users. And then really, as this legislation has passed, browsers have really adopted this trend. But one of the things I really want to highlight today is why are we freaking out about it? This has been going on for a while. I just mentioned 2012. And Safari, this has really always been the case, it feels like. I mean, Safari was first and they blocked the third-party cookies back in 2017, which in the digital space, 2017, 5 years ago now, like that seems like the beginning of time with digital advertising at this point. So much has changed since then. So why are we still talking about it? And then around June of 2019, Firefox and other smaller browsers followed this as well, just sort of proactively to protect the consumer. And last but not least, Chrome announced that they will eliminate cookies at the end of some point in 2023, originally 2022, but they've made some changes to that, which is why we're having this conversation today. So I take it back. If all other browsers have already blocked cookies, it really begs the question, why having a Chrome announcement are we all hair on fire in the industry? I feel like this word cookie all of a sudden has ruined the original chocolate chip cookie for me because it's changed the persona of what the cookie is for me and my personal job and my day-to-day because there's so much conversation around it. So why does it matter? So I'm going to show you why. So if we look at browsers market share in the United States, we see that Chrome holds 45% of all of the users, while Safari holds 39%. I mean, that's nothing to sneeze at, and they've made this change a long time ago. All other browsers, which the stat always surprises me, 5 or less goes to all the other browsers between Edge and Firefox and Internet Explorer, which is crazy to me. I know people still use Internet Explorer, they haven't updated to Edge. So since Safari, Firefox, and all the other browsers made this change, Chrome was really just, unfortunately, the nail in the coffin that was the only thing left supporting the cookies. So it is forcing us in the industry to make that change. Awesome. So then the loss, if we look at the loss of the third-party cookies, it's going to really impact the digital ecosystem in a big way. We can really look at into 3 buckets. So advertising, and that's obviously what I'm highlighting a lot in our conversation today, analytics, and experiences. So advertising, analytics, experiences. I'm going to reiterate it again. So if you dive into the advertising, the ability to target your customer, like I've said a couple of times before on this call already, is going to be significantly diminished from pure customer targeting, retargeting, or lookalike targeting is really going to be transitioning more to contextual targeting. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just essentially changing how we reach consumers today and really changing the narrative on that one-to-one targeting and more of a one-to-many. So we're going to be reaching a similar type audience, but it's not going to be as hyper specific to that one user. Analytics, so the ability to measure platform activity and understand true return on ad spend is going to suffer a little bit because you're not going to be able to follow that user around the internet and say, they went to this page and then they went to this page and then here's other websites that they visited. And because they came to my site, I'm going to follow them around the internet and create user profiles. Ultimately, that's really going to change the narrative on what analytics is going to look like for us. And then ultimately experiences. I mean, I think we take it for granted that when you go to a website, you're able to log in and it remembers history about you. It makes recommendations about your specific yoga pants that you typically buy. We're going to lose some of that customer experience because it's not going to be caching data on me and keeping it in the system over and over again. So I think we take it a little bit for granted. In my mind, I kind of think it's a bummer. I like being targeted by digital advertising. I'm biased, but it has really that site personalization. So I know when I log in to a platform, it may not remember as much about me unless it's a walled garden like we spoke about before. And then even just, A/B experimentation. It's going to be hard to see which creative works better than another creative because we're not really comparing apples to apples. You won't be able to say, well, a user that looked like X responded this way to an advertisement. And I always really like when I have that persistent logged in state. I don't ever want to have to remember my passwords. So I really like when things just stay logged in, but that is going to unfortunately change a little bit. So now what? Now what do we do about it? I feel like hopefully I didn't freak everybody out in the digital advertising space or advertising in general. Now what? So, well, first of all, relax, take a deep breath. The entire industry is working through this and figuring out together. I would say from where I sit in my perspective, the IAB and everybody is getting together and basically saying, well, this is how we're going to figure out how to respond. So from our seat, it's protecting the consumer and it's doing what's right. So my advice is don't freak out. There are many proposal ideas that are out there that would replace the cookie, but there's really no clear alternative that has emerged. But we're not trying to replace it. So the goal is that we're trying to protect consumers. So if we just created something that was a one-to-one and completely recreated exactly what we've done here, then we haven't really achieved the goal, now did we? So that's not the end game. And really from a data collection standpoint, first-party data is gonna be key. If you do have any sort of research on this topic, you're gonna see the importance of first-party data with the ability to target our customers. And it's really how brands are going to understand how they're going to connect with their customer moving forward. So when I think of a first party data from a brand's perspective, they're going to want to say, sign up for our emails or our newsletters so that they can collect that data more and be able to have direct conversations with their consumer. So from a targeting perspective, looking at targeting, I've mentioned this a couple of times and I'm going to beat that dead horse, is there's going to be a shift from one-to-one and really a renewed focus on that one-to-many. Again, it still works, so I wouldn't be afraid of it. Lean into it. And there's also going to be what are being referred to as clean rooms that really aggregate and anonymize data. So it's still protecting the consumer, but then we can essentially say, well, these consumers fall into this bucket. I may not know their ID. I don't know who they are. I don't know exactly all about them, but I know that they fit into this consumer bucket and it will be anonymized. So we'll be able to target them. Again, some of that stuff hasn't been all the way worked through, but a lot of the media partners are having the ability to test things in these clean rooms to be able to figure out how it's working and where to go from here. And last but not least, attribution is going to be really tough. I think attribution has become increasingly more and more important with conversations with clients. But the reality of the situation is it's changing. And outside of a walled garden, it's going to be really difficult to see what worked and what didn't. So we're going to have to go back to the basics and have conversations with our customers and really understand what worked from their side and what are they seeing from their end, because it's all of a sudden kind of going to go back to more of a traditional media attribution approach. Awesome. And before we go through really each player and how they're all affected in the ecosystem, I really want to just emphasize again that the goal of eliminating those cookies was to limit the data that consumer leaves behind, which can be really stitched together across the internet. It's just going to essentially eliminate that. So there's going to be various ways that we'll be able to target those individuals directly, but it's going to be trial and error. And I know that sounds a little scary, but the fact that Google extended our timeline, so ultimately it was supposed to be top of next year that cookies were going to go away, but they've actually pushed it to the end of 2022, so it would be in impact in top of 2023. So in my mind, it gave us more time to figure it out, but we're going to have to learn as we go. So brands with a fully in-house function will be the most impacted, because if they're not really working with agencies that have access to all these walled gardens, they're going to have to figure it out and figure out how to partner with them. Brands that do partner with agencies are going to see a little bit of a benefit because they're going to understand what's changing. So that's the benefit really now. If brands want to start working with agencies that are making those changes, that would be ultimately my suggestion. And then really the DMPs, ad exchanges, they're going to have to pivot and adapt to other models to identify those users. And really what's going to happen is consolidation across the advertising and marketing technology landscape. There's a lot of people in this space that are programmatically buying, but ultimately we're going to have to figure out how it works and how to execute. And that's what's going to essentially change. Exchanges are making margins on top of the price of media. So they're going to be expected to earn a little bit less because there's going to be less media that's frankly available in those spaces. And then there's going to be, just from a DSP and a SSP standpoint, there's going to be more of a shift towards those walled gardens and private marketplaces and buying. And then really those walled gardens are what's going to be the most important, and how to get into that inventory set. And then publishers are going to really need to grow those direct deals to be able to monetize their inventory specifically, to make sure that they're getting money for it. Whereas before they were able to sell it off programmatically, now they're going to have to do some more direct buys. And then really in summary, this was driven, I know we've talked about it, by regulatory policies and consumer demand for privacy. So pretty much all players in the programmatic ecosystem have been impacted, but no clarity exists on what's really going to happen next. We have to figure it out. And then marketers are really going to move around away from that one-to-one advertising and really back to one-to-many. And then publishers, unfortunately, are going to have to brace for potentially lower demand because of lack of attribution, unless they figure out a new business model, how to sell off their inventory. And then the good news is that we're really trying to figure this out as an industry. It's really not an isolated problem that, Cox Media or I saw Fox in the chat. It's not that in one individual brand, agency, advertising company is experiencing. We're all in it together. And I think that's ultimately a good place to be because we're going to figure it out. Awesome. Well, I know that was a hefty amount of information about tech, about privacy laws, and it crams it all into a short period of time. And again, I appreciate your time and perspective. So let's go ahead and ask some questions if you guys have any.
There are some questions in the box. The first one is, given walled gardens will be one of the few entry points to targeting customers, do you see the tactics like paid social campaigns really rising to the top for brands trying to reach an audience and track ROI and conversions versus something, let's say, like display advertising?
Yes, I would say so much yes. I think Jennifer asked that question. Absolutely. And walled gardens, I think when you say that, you think of the big ones. You're going to think of Facebook, you're going to think of Google, you're going to think of Amazon, and you're like, oh, they're going to take all the advertising money, which personally, that's frustrating. But you can create partnerships with not only walled gardens, but create your own data sets. I do think social is going to start to rise to the top because they're going to be able to own their own platforms and say, this person, if you click on a social ad, you'll be able to say, wow, this person converted because they clicked on this form and they filled it out in Facebook. So I do think so. There's going to be a place for display and we're going to change in the industry, but it hasn't been quite defined yet. Good question.
Another kind of extension of the walled garden topic. Do you think search engines will ever try and position themselves as walled gardens? And from a search perspective, do you believe this will become even more premium?
Yeah, so it's possible. I mean, the reality of the situation, and I hope nobody from Google is on the call, but a lot of you can look at this and think, wow, is Google trying to take over and own the narrative of advertising? Well, no, the answer is no, but I think that right now, from a search perspective, there is the ability to have that direct attribution in a sense, because you click on an ad. So they can say someone searched a specific word and they clicked on it and they ended up on your page. They also have the ability to track phone calls and say, hey, someone made a phone call. In some industries, you can even record those phone calls and see what's said. So I would say search has always been at the bottom of the marketing funnel and closer to the purchase end. So it is much closer to the conversion and nothing's really changing there in that platform. And then I think someone asked about attribution. So I feel like since I'm saying that, so attribution is really just showing what worked and what didn't. So I think in a simple sense is if I buy an advertising campaign, it ultimately boils down to what worked. And every single person I've ever spoken to defines attribution to them a little bit differently. So what it all boils down to is what happened in my business? Did I see great results? Is ultimately how people are measuring attribution. From the media side, we're going to say, well, did you get any phone calls or did you get any clicks to your site? Did you get any form fills? And attribution is really more like a correlation in my mind. And I think that those words in my space are a little bit more integrated in my mind.
Awesome. I know you're coming at this from a bit of a sales perspective, and I think we have quite a few marketers on the call. With the loss of cookies and all the data that comes with it, you mentioned things like building an email list. What else can content creators do to collaborate with their supply provider to kind of build their own audiences that they can learn from and target?
That's a great question. I think you have to own your relationship with your consumer so much more than you did before. Whereas, I mean, everybody could go not everybody. I don't know why you would want to, but a lot of people could go to the Google Display Network and say, I want to target people that shop for this type of product and service. That may not be the case anymore, and that's going to change a little bit. So you're going to have to understand more about your consumer than you think you do today, and really understand who your demographic is. So I think, I don't know if you've all noticed, but like I get them all the time. Now there's like SMS, like register for a text to win type things. Like it almost feels like we're traveling back in time and we're going to like enter for this contest, or give us your cell phone number and we'll send you a text message for 10% off. Like I almost feel like I'm traveling back in time, but there's a reason why they're doing that. Is because they are trying to create those collection set so that they can maybe utilize it for IP targeting, CRM targeting, that they can still do display, but now it's their own data set. So yeah, it might be an email blast, but I think they're going to take those emails and use them in other ways.
Yeah, I think everything can be a tool. And like you said, going backwards, look at the growth of the QR code in the last year and a half. Everybody has a QR code, and
we're like, what is this?
Yeah, once you click on that, you can start doing your own sort of tracking within limits. That was a great answer. Thank you so much. We have one that's a little bit off topic a bit, but WICT is all about the spirit of mentoring. Can you just mention a little bit about what you do, or some advice for women in your area of expertise who are looking to kind of get to your level and grow their experience and their knowledge in this area?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would say thank you so much for that question. I still feel like, even being asked to speak at this event, like I feel like I'm still learning, I'm still growing, and I'm just honored and humbled to be a part of this group and women. And I think that's part of it. I think just you continue to always look towards yourself as a learner, as a student, and then never just get in a complacency where you're the mentor. Always be the mentee and always look to others. I have had the privilege of some really strong women that have set expectations and allowed me to follow them and learn from them. And they've challenged me in epic ways and asked really hard questions. But then there's also not just women. I think there are so many great men in this industry that believe in us too. And I want to make sure that they get credit for it too, because there's so many people that have leaned into my experience. But a lot of that comes from, I'll say, ownership. So ask people to mentor you, ask people for help, or why do you think of it that way? Because ultimately for me, the more opportunities that I've been given or have taken have been because I said, hey, can I come to the party? Or can I meet with you? Can I ask you more questions about that? And I think that's where it starts, is really just asking questions of others.
Absolutely. Great point. Looks like we have one more question. What's the sense you have about agency preparedness for the seismic shift that's ahead? So looking into your crystal ball, how confident are you that there will be solutions for brands soon, given that so many of us outsource to agencies?
That is a solid question. And my answer, if it was supposed to happen by the end of this year, I mean, honestly, everybody seems like they're scrambling. If I'm being totally honest, they were testing basically in Google's privacy sandbox, because Google's creating all of these new places that you can basically test and see if it works. And it wasn't a good place. People weren't willing to test. They were having issues. They want it to be the exact same experience. So what Google actually did is they pushed back until 2023 when this was going to happen. So my answer is, for now, if we were supposed to be done by the end of this year, we were not ready. I would say brands, agencies are not ready, but the extension, I think, gave us an opportunity to make changes, but know that we need to almost make them on the same timeline that we were going to. And unfortunately, it's just going to filter out some agencies that aren't prepared. But there's a lot of people that have their own first party data, and they're going to just have to lean into that. And, when I think about Cox Media and Cox, we are a cable provider. We do have subscribers. We do have some data sets that we can tap into in the short term for our customers to make sure that we're reaching our audiences. So long answer, but short version, some sort of not ready. Some of us are.
Great answer. And I do think, there will be room for more collaboration between brand clients and their agencies. So I think it's just going to be an adjustment period. We have one more
Yeah.
question. It is, and my chat box is being a little.
Oh, I got it from Jennifer.
Thank you.
So Jennifer asked, how has the pandemic impacted what's on the roadmap for Cox? And also, what are you looking forward most to the future of your company? While the roadmap has been impacted greatly from Cox's perspective, but almost in a good way. I mean, we have to adapt with the industry. Attribution and first-party data is more of a focus for us, and establishing more and more relationships with walled gardens so that we can make sure to target the right users for our customers. So on the media side, we partner with lots of different small businesses, medium-sized businesses, and ultimately we help them with their advertising. I would say sometimes we almost function like an agency in that sense. So from our side, we're really focused on our own data sets and how can we anonymize them, protect our customer from a residential side, from a Cox side, and utilize that for our media side. So I would say that's a lot of our focus. And then really some of our services is a focus as well. We're really trying to figure out how can we be that true agency for our customers. So those are some of the things that we're evaluating on our roadmap for now. What I'm most looking forward to is, if you get the sense from what Nicole said about me in the beginning, is I'm a digital dork, and that's been something that I always am excited about. And the industry is changing, and honestly, it feels a little uncomfortable. But with the level of being uncomfortable comes great change and great growth. And as an organization, we are, I'll say, investing big in the future of digital, with not only in the people that we hire and the products that we're investing in, the tools and resources that we're figuring out to move forward. But ultimately for me, Cox has always been a phenomenal company that focuses on the customer first, and that will continue to be how we move forward.
Excellent answer. Yeah, I think, it's a big challenge, but there is a lot to look forward to. And this has been super informative. I feel like everyone got a lot of valuable information in it. You've gotten a lot of compliments in the chat box. So I want to thank everyone for being here. Last chance for a couple, last minute questions. We have 3 minutes left. If anybody has any outline questions.
Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate your time, and feel free to reach out to me if you have any more questions. Maybe you didn't think of it today, but feel free to reach out to me. My email is angela.kozlowski@coxmedia.com. Reach out to me if you have anything.
Thank you, Angela. This was excellent. I hope everyone plans to stick around for our next panel on scaling for live event streaming. So I believe it starts in about 13 minutes. But yeah, I'm glad everyone came. I hope you found it insightful. Angela, you were wonderful. Thank you so much for your contribution, and good luck navigating the cookieless world. I think you've equipped us with all the tools to do so ourselves.
Awesome. Good luck to all of you too.
Thank you. I'm gonna leave. We have about 2 minutes left. I'm just gonna kind of leave the chat open. But otherwise, I hope everyone enjoys the rest of our programming we have coming up today. And again, thanks for coming.
Awesome. Bye, everyone. Thank you.